different applications of the data. And we'll follow up with some Q&A after the presentation. But in terms of quick introductions, so my name is Jordan Beamer, assistant manager in the surface water section, helping out with. I've been working on the statewide ET project for several years, and really excited to see the initial data development and report getting completed, and really excited to bring on some very talented folks to the ET and water use team. So I'll hand it off to Aaron for some introductions.
Morning, everyone. My name is Aaron Fellows. I started at Oregon OWRD about a year ago. I have moved into the ET coordinator role after Jordan has moved to assistant manager. Yeah, so I'm doing that coordination work both internally and with some of our the people that we're working externally with, like OSU and those sorts of collaborations. We have a couple new staff that are supporting the ET work. And we have Mukesh Muhada. Mukesh, do you want to introduce yourself? Mukesh started about 6 months ago. Yeah.
Hello everyone, I'm Mukesh Mehta. I recently joined OWRD in ET and water use. I mostly work with the recently developed statewide ET data from DRI. So I'm helping Aaron Fellows and on the different basin data analysis, and mainly focusing on the compiling those data and generating the summary report, and then after providing the group and to understand and review those kind of data. And in the future, we are also working on the more data improvement things and data management things. So those roles are my main focus right now. So thank you.
Welcome. Yeah, we're lucky to have Mukesh. Came from UC Davis, a lot of experience in agricultural water use, obviously very directly applicable to the work we're doing here. We've been lucky to work with Kelsey Sherland, decent amount from groundwater. I don't know if Kelsey's here this morning. Kelsey has been helping us with programming and that sorts of things. So we've enjoyed that collaboration. So there we go. What is this?
So I see people off.
Here we go. All right, so the statewide ET data set that Jordan has helped bring to the agency is really it's a collection of different data sets that inform our work. So it all revolves around better understanding of ET. For the state, it includes information about evapotranspiration from reservoirs, major reservoirs across the state, from irrigated agricultural fields. Jordan helped expand the AgriMet network, which is a series of weather stations across the state, helping facilitate an additional 30 new stations getting installed. So this work touches on a lot of different aspects of ET. irrigation water use, consumptive use. This is a very valuable set of projects. With these new data, we have new information and a new understanding of consumptive use in ET across Oregon. We're going to talk a little bit about the different parameters that are available in these data sets, how they work together to help us understand Oregon's hydrology. These data are unique in their spatial coverage, right? This is a statewide data set covering Oregon's hydrological domain. The data has been processed in a consistent fashion across that domain from the mid-1980s to current. So this is helping us with being able to compare both spatially and across time. These data are, there's quite a large data set, and they're structured in a consistent fashion, which is letting us use computer programming tools to pull these data together in an efficient way and address people's questions a little more efficiently and in a reproducible fashion. So this also is touching on to some of the other themes that we've talked about. Chung Wei led us through some computer programming tutorials yesterday. We're thinking about how we can tap into these best methods for documenting our work, generating reports. Tess is doing some work there using markdown methods to help document our methods and approaches in systematic fashions. The generation of these data were carefully documented and reviewed. So the ET models themselves that were generated for Oregon were reviewed oftentimes by the scientists who developed these models. Open ET scientists who then programmed these models into, they often leveraged Google Earth Engine, so some cloud computing technologies to run these models. They also reviewed these data and wrote a report that backs and substantiates the quality of the work. The Desert Research Institute also helped generate some of the data sets that we are using at OWRD. They wrote a report and had it reviewed by Desert Research Institute scientists, further giving credibility and checks on these data. So we're helping, so this put us in a situation where we're building on a solid foundation, right? The pieces of these data that have come together have been documented and reviewed, and now we can work on top of them, right? So together, these pieces open up some new applications and new ways of understanding Oregon's hydrology. Annette asked us to pull together some ideas about how we should be using this data and think carefully about the application of these data. We took some time to review past methods or past applications for aerial and satellite data at OWRD. We thought about the data availability and parameters that these new data sets provide. We considered the accuracy of these data and how they might be used. We generated a memo. I have a link on the last slide to that memo, but it's posted on the website, and we can give that memo to you all. So just a brief kind of touch on some of these existing methods that are commonly used. Aerial imagery, vegetation indices from remote sensing satellites, such as the Normalized Difference Vegetation Index, or NDVI, are often used at OWRD to help identify agricultural fields, or infrastructure such as diversions or canals, those sorts of things. These data have helped us understand possible irrigation patterns, and you can find this through different reports that OWRD has generated in the past. These are used in water rights transfers, and in different parts of the agency. So more recently, with the generation of these ET data, people are starting to tap into OpenET and its data generation. There's web apps for exploring that data. So we've added that here. This is actually a snapshot from the Walla Walla Basin, and you can see the different properties a little bit of how these imagery or what they inform. So aerial imagery often has pretty high resolution, but low temporal coverage. So you might get one snapshot a year, but you can really resolve lots of features in these fields, and even ditches or diversions and that sorts of things. NDVI signaling vegetation growth, health, greenness, that thing. Higher temporal coverage helps you understand what's happened across the season. In fact, you can see this field in the aerial image doesn't look green, but according to NDVI, you can see the greenness. And the ET image is telling you something entirely different, which is the flux of the water vapor out of these fields.
Oh, it didn't work very well. No, it ripped. It ripped. So I was like, oh, I could put that.
Somebody is not muted. So actually my battery's going low. I got it. Sorry, everyone. Be tired. Appreciate it. Thank you. So these data also find a place in supporting water budgets for OWRD. So past methods that would often be used would be applying the net irrigation water requirement for a field or region, and say multiplying that by irrigated acreage. This would be the total volume of water that might be applied in a region. So these new data sets are a refinement on some of these past methods. These remotely sensed data are telling you about what's actually transpired using remotely sensed observations, or at least they're trying to estimate that. That's different from our net irrigation water requirement, which would be the maximum volume in a budget. These are trying to estimate what's actually occurred or evaporated. You could imagine a scenario where a field wasn't even irrigated in a given year. Your net irrigation water requirement would say, oh, they put on 2.5 feet of water, 3 feet of water. Whereas remotely sensed data would capture that that irrigation had not occurred. These ET data can help signal if irrigation occurred, which obviously has value to the work that our agency does. Again, there's good temporal and spatial coverage. They tell us about what has been consumptively used. So the water that has been lost from our water system versus how much has been applied from irrigation. And again, they're letting us leverage computer programming tools. Ben.
How does that vary across the state? Is the Willamette Valley arid enough in the summer that presence of open ET is an indicator of irrigation?
I think that's a really good question. We haven't fully evaluated those different, like how it's performing in different parts of the state. That's an ongoing consideration. So to kind of give a rundown of key pieces of data that are available to us. Maps of agricultural fields across the state. About 250,000 of them were mapped by the Desert Research Institute. They're attributed to ground and surface water sources with our water rights. DRI identified the irrigation systems for these different fields. There's field level parameters for these data, and that includes the irrigation status from the ear mapper model. So this is a machine learning random forest model that attempts to identify if a field was irrigated in a given year. Total ET from each field, the consumptive use from irrigation. Okay, so this is ET subtracting away natural precipitation. So we're trying to understand how much that ET is coming from irrigation water, applied water from irrigation. So this is how much the irrigator is actually putting on that field. And the Desert Research Institute also estimated the net irrigation water requirement across Oregon using the ET demands model. This is kind of a parallel to Cuenca's work that we often cite.
Yeah, I was wondering, so you've got monthly field parameters, including applied water and irrigation. Does that work during the winter as well?
They provided monthly data. Many of those are gap filled, in part because this is remotely sensed imagery and it's cloudy. They didn't get a measurement in winter, but there are monthly estimates. We can talk a little bit how that was done in specifics.
Is there any consideration for the soil type or crop?
For this net irrigation, so it comes into play. It's not it's not a dominant impact on these data, but it definitely rolls into this data set. In fact, they did.
We
They've
have
even,
that information in the database, the
Yeah.
crop type and soil type.
yes, there's right, as Jordan cleaned up there. Yeah, that's in the data set too, so. And then excitingly, we have estimates of open water evaporation, including ET from key reservoirs across the state, and Desert Research Institute gave us estimates of shallow water evaporation. So if there's a bulge and you want to try to suss out how much ET or water loss came from that bulge, this may be an option. Trying to understand some of the uncertainty, and this is going to roll into the applications that we can, or how we can use it. ET is estimated to be within 10 to 20% of its actual value. These are at monthly intervals. This study by Volk, which did a pretty comprehensive and careful examination of open ET specifically, found they compared these remotely sensed data with field-based eddy covariance measurements at the same field. They found that the remotely sensed data was the mean absolute error was 15.84 millimeters across these 44 croplands that they looked at, or 17%. The data, the remotely sensed data performed best in croplands, somewhat weaker in naturally vegetated areas. It performed okay in like wetland areas, but it performs best in croplands. The Desert Research Institute kind of walks through these data in the generation of the consumptive use from irrigation and applied water. They estimate that their consumptive use from irrigation is within 10 to 30%, but they're not able to fully quantify all parts of that calculation. The applied water is presumably slightly more than the consumptive use from irrigation because it depends on that calculation, and it's not fully quantified. It's important to note that the accuracy of these data vary with several factors. We can talk about these for a particular case or situation that you might have, but they're depending on Oregon's water rights mapping, for example. Is it from groundwater? Is it from surface water? The number of fields, right? A lot of the errors in these data tend to be random. So as you aggregate over larger areas, you're gonna remove some of that individual field random errors, season, time period, and these sorts of things.
Yeah, bring up a pet topic of mine, and that's the presence of tile drain systems. I'm wondering if, sounds like it hasn't. The EP models don't consider or incorporate the potential impacts of tile drain systems. They're very prevalent throughout the Willamette. The latest estimate I found was like over 300,000 irrigated acres have tile drains. And the presence of tile drain systems interrupt the hydrologic cycle. They basically effectively reduce ET. And among other factors, they also accelerate discharge to surface water features. So they're, I think, limited primarily to the Willamette. But I'm just wondering, it sounds like it's not been considered. I've talked to Laurel about this a bit in the past, and I think she said they're not. And if it needs to be, or if it should be considered, I don't know if anybody knows the extent of these systems and be able to quantify the amount of water that they're shunting in essence. But could be part of the error calculation.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for bringing up that situation. I don't have a great thought about it at the moment. Hopefully we can talk about that and kind of suss out some of the.
Yeah, I've done some literature searches on this, and most paper studies tend to be focused on the water quality impacts. The concentration and discharge of pesticides and whatnot, nutrients to surface water features. Not a whole lot's been done on quantifying.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, so as you go through different projects, do you envision kind of like getting an estimate of that accuracy at some point? Like, I'm like saying why would be kind of like a law to do. But I know that you're working with the Walla Walla or the Shoot. Are you considering like at least getting a sense of like how off would that be, just like the water applied for irrigation?
We've definitely honed in on that as a key thing to pursue further and think about more carefully. It's, we've been working with Kelsey, like you mentioned, in the Walla Walla, Mukas, and myself have also been thinking about this in other parts of the state. So that's an ongoing piece of work that we've identified that we see a need.
To drive that point home, you'll see when Aaron gets a bit more into the applications that our current understanding of accuracy really is a huge driver of why we ended up with the kind of approaches we're using.
Yeah, thank you. It rolls into our suggested applications that we're gonna talk about next. And, let's take a look at some of those. But first, just to get a sense of what we're talking about here, here's, statewide maps that were generated from these data by the Desert Research Institute. On the left are, Puck scale aggregations of consumptive use from irrigation water across the state. It varies from around 2 feet to very small. In yellow is like almost zero. So around Astoria, again, a lot of natural precipitation, probably not huge irrigation demand. You're seeing lower levels of consumptive use from irrigation water, whereas in eastern Oregon, you're seeing some of these higher values around areas like Hermiston. It's approaching 2 feet of consumptive use from irrigation water. On the right are mapped evaporation values in inches per year for the reservoirs that are included in these data. You can see they're ranging from about 30 inches to almost 4 feet of evaporation. So these were generated using the daily lake evaporation model. So considering our applications where we're seeing the best opportunities, best use of these data, it's in water budgets at large spatial scales. Jordan's already showed us that these data can be applied to groundwater studies effectively. And an example in Kearney, we're also using this in approach in the Walla Walla. These data can have good use in supporting fieldwork planning and identifying regions where agricultural activity may be occurring. For example, if you have limited staff in an area, you want to target your work, these are going to help you hone in your best use of your time. Again, water budgets, but from broader sense, not just groundwater studies, but Joe and John are looking to use these data in the Deschutes for some of their ongoing work. And these data are getting used for understanding reservoir evaporation in the Deschutes. So to make some of these applications concrete, we're applying these data in the Walla Walla River Basin study. This work is trying to understand water budgets and groundwater pumpage in the Walla Walla River Basin. This is working with the United States Geological Survey, state of Washington, and we're applying these data to understand irrigation water use. Is both the consumptive use, but also the applied water. These data are getting rolled into and used for the Deschutes storage report in bi-weekly updates. So McKess has recently started providing these data bi-weekly to the staff in the Deschutes. So here we're looking at, this is actually a longer term record from 3 key reservoirs in the Deschutes Basin. We're looking at Crane Prairie on the top, Crescent Lake in the middle panel, and then Wickiup Reservoir on the bottom. You can get seasonal and down to daily records of evaporation. The Desert Research Institute is running this model with a 3-day lab and serving it up on an application interface. So we call that every 2 weeks, pull that data down and provide it to Deschutes staff for their report. This is interesting because previously the way this worked, ET estimates for those reservoirs were coming from pan evaporation. People would go out in the field and take a measurement and fax it to the water master, and that would get rolled in. So the workflow has become simplified. And although we've exchanged some of these direct measurements with models, that we did compare them for a year and they look like they're agreeing quite well. So there's been this is an efficiency and a shift to these modeling based methods. We're starting to try to support work in Harney Valley with these data. So we helped Tim earlier this year update Jordan's work to understand groundwater pumpage trends for the last few years. So we ran the DRI's data set and tried to help them understand what's happened since Jordan released his report. Graham Thomas in the surface water section hopes to apply these data for the Harney Conservation Reserve and Enhancement Program, or PREP. This is where people can exchange their water rights in for money. We're currently exploring possibilities to help field staff with their planning. So I took a few screenshots here of different tools that we've suggested to support some of this work. We've got Climate Engine, which is a good way to access those vegetation indices that we've used in the past. Here's a web tool, OpenET, that can help you get to near real-time ET estimates that we've been kind of focused on here. And then this bottom panel is a screenshot of EarMapper, which is that machine learning model that tries to identify if a field was irrigated in a particular year. So I talked a little bit about this. I don't think we need to go into this too far, but these data are intended to be used for the Harney Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program. In particular, this is it's a voluntary program. It's administered by OWRD. And again, Graham Thomas in the surface water section is helping us do that work. And also the U.S. Farm Services Agency. Irrigators receive payments to convert their groundwater irrigated fields into conserved land. These remotely sensed ET data are going to help support that evidence that those people were in fact using their irrigation water and confirm that they stopped. We're starting to build out the use of these data and explore possible applications. This includes updates to the surface water information modeling system or the update to WARS. Again, this is providing a long record and spatially consistent record of consumptive use and applied water across the state. Irrigation is a main a key element of water use in Oregon, right? If we look at some of the budgets, for example, that the USGS has pulled together for Oregon, their 2015 report that they just released on water use by state. It says that irrigation is accounting for like 78% of water use in Oregon. Okay, so these data are going to inform a key piece of water use and therefore inform, really be a key supporting factor for this SWIMS update, potentially. We see that these data could be really valuable for water rights transfers, supporting evidence of use or non-use, right? We are emphasizing here that these shouldn't be used as the sole or primary evidence for this use or non-use designation due to their accuracy and those types of factors. But they certainly help you inform a better picture of what's going on.
Do you foresee a time when this will be the primary evidence used?
I think it's a great question. I don't know that.
I think as the data evolves over time, we will periodically reevaluate our memo around these things.
Thank you, Annette. Yeah.
I'm coming from the place-based planning side of things, so maybe our accuracy needs are a little bit less stringent, kind of going to be growing need for regulatory decisions, because what we're thinking is that we might need something to help us screen or separate or identify some in the landscape, that can be helpful for inform people about like areas that they may consider. With, for instance, as a user, I may not need like for you to get all down to the detail of the accuracy that you would need for a regulatory. So is there an opportunity to start leveraging what already is there for a chunk like what applies for irrigation?
Can you restate the question, Aaron? I want to acknowledge that there's 87 people online as well. So I want to make sure they're hearing the questions as well.
Thank you. So Francisco brought up the question about how the interaction of data accuracy and our appropriate uses of these data. So he identified regulatory uses that have very strict and very important kind of data handling and accuracy needs. And he was asking about applications and situations where that type of accuracy might not be needed. I think it's a great question. I think you can find really good uses of these data and also considering how your analysis uses them to inform the question, right? Remotely sensed data is particularly strong at relative patterns, both spatial and temporally, right? These are calculated in consistent fashion. So it's also how you're going to use this data to answer the questions that you have. Yes, I see a lot of value in forming scientific investigations. And I think your distinction between that and regulatory work is a good one. We're suggesting at this time to be careful and not use these data for applied water at an individual field where high accuracy is required. Again, we talked a little bit about how these data can have random errors. An individual field might show important differences from what's actually happening. We're suggesting to not use this data as your primary or sole evidence of non-use. You could end up with a wrong conclusion and pursue a path that is not advantageous to ourselves or the agency. We're not suggesting using this data for a water use reporting requirement at this time. We're still looking to people report flow meter records. And this last point is be careful in your interpretation when using this in near real time or within season activities. Remember, crops and plants are withdrawing water that's stored in the soil. If irrigator or there is a decent amount of rainfall in the year, those plants are and crops are going to draw on that water. You could mislead yourself by seeing elevated ETs when in fact an irrigator stopped irrigating.
And you got a question back there.
Yes, please.
One of the applications, I didn't see it up there, that it shows up in one of the USGS publications is for, and we don't, our role in it is kind of nebulous, but water trading. And, you know, it just made me think of like tactile and the in-stream boosting and that kind of curve, like what role, yeah. Yeah, Karen, I can.
Please, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think one thing I don't, this is mostly a technical presentation. I've got into some of our decisions that we have made, given our understanding of the accuracy of the data and our judgment calls as they relate to our policies and where we're gonna apply this, right? So there is absolutely a policy consideration here. I think when it comes to water users, empowering them to use the information and, we're gonna get to test this out in the Deschutes. Right, first, I'm expecting if and when they get their market, we're moving, this is going to be a question for us to wrestle with.
Rachel,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt. The people online could not hear the question and cannot hear the response. So if we could have somebody else take the question, and then if whoever's answering it could get close to the owl, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
For
Thanks, Annette.
those online, we had a question about using these data for water trading water and, for example, in-stream leases.
Thanks, Erin. And I just wanted to highlight that this is, even though the technical accuracy of the data is, our main driver for deciding what we think are the right applications of this data, there's always going to be this policy call about whether or not this is the appropriate data to use. It's going to depend on how we engage with our interested parties. And I think we're going to get to test this out in a few cases where the coming up, like the water bank in the Deschutes, where we're probably going to be asked to utilize or consider some of this information. I think, Graham, people are bringing some of this up to you, most likely as proof, or like people are wanting us to engage with the data as opposed to the other way around. So I think we're going to have some good tests of how much confidence people have in this and how willing people are to rely on it and engage in it with us. We're seeing it play out in California, both sides, and I think it's that's really, we're kind of watching them and following their trajectory there. Justin, did you want to add anything?
That was a thumbs up that I was thinking that water districts in California are already exclusively using OpenET as the tool they use to manage water banks and transfers and markets.
I know.
Nothing.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. I know, so California absolutely is using this. Idaho has been using metric for a long time in these avenues, but they are managing water based on consumptive use. So it's not total diversion. So it's that trend, like Erin went through, that's like, yeah, we can consumptive use. This tool gets us close, but how much did you pump out of the ground based on OpenET? We can't quite quantify that. Yeah, Ben.
Follow-on question, given that there are lots of groups who are presenting OpenET as available to the public, have you all seen ways to help communicate the uncertainty associated with those estimates, or what are or are not appropriate uses in cases where the public might be accessing the data that you find especially effective or not?
That's a good, Jordan or Erin, do you want to talk about the work that Rachel O'Connor is starting, that I know we're partnering with her a little bit on that, because I think the short answer, Ben, is no. I think I think the community of people in that world is still working on that, but I don't, or if there is another example of 1.2.
Yeah, I mean, probably in terms of, the focused application of the data for sort of irrigation, water use estimates. I know the partners at Oregon State Extension and through this House Bill 2010 that was funded last year are kind of building this called AgTap, Agricultural Technical Assistance Program. And we're really excited about that as a way to sort of have some experts, kind of boots on the ground who are working with producers and communities around kind of the accuracy and application of the data for that particular sector. But I know that there are, I'm not sure if we have folks from OSU or DRI on the call, but there is quite a bit more outreach happening around getting the data into the hands, making it more accessible so people can actually use it, because it's a huge data set that's challenging to kind of rank.
I think that's a really interesting question. And our most recent work has been focused on trying to get this to be useful for us as an agency. But we are talking, we have monthly meetings with OSU. Their extension office is starting to engage and work with communities more directly on how can we use this data. So I think they're holding some meetings. It's like this month or the next couple months with people.
Yeah.
We're also OWRD also has supported some curriculum development for 9th and 10th graders.
Thank you, Sue.
Yeah, Sue. If you want to jump in, Sue, please. But she's helping facilitate the development of this curriculum, and it matches the science standards for the state, and it is intended to use those agrometric weather stations. So it's helping students understand data literacy, and the curriculum's addressing food production, scarcity, irrigation. It's quite an innovative curriculum compared to when I was in school. So I guess people are addressing it at different levels.
Aaron, I want to add something you've brought up as a great bridge, which I really appreciate. So Ben, I guess less, here's a good way to communicate it, and more of, here's a tool that's a good starting point for approaching the data, and that's the ear mapper tool. And Aaron, you've been talking about that actually as you've been working more and more with field staff who are, we do encourage the use of this for planning your field work, right? For figuring out where you want to focus your time and effort. And ear mapper, Aaron, as you've described it, it just does, I'll let you, if you don't mind, just describing what you see the benefit of that tool being.
Sure, obviously a key thing for field staff is trying to understand use or non-use. Ear mapper is one of these new statistical machine learning models. It's using random forest. It's condensing a lot of these different data layers. It looks at NDVI, the crop data layer that's produced by the USDA. I think they looked at like 160 so different predictors in the random forest model, and NDVI and crop type and those sorts of things come out as some of the most important ones. But it's condensing a lot of these more complex remotely sensed data into one layer that people can look at to kind of address that. So they do it in every year. And I can imagine, I would think field staff would be particularly interested if you know, they can look at a record of like 5 years in a row and be like, hey, maybe I should go visit this area.
Yeah, that sounds great, and I wanna build on, Dan's question about, so the moment that we put data out there, it's a dialogue that's gonna be open on the community, right? So do we have, ideas, how are we gonna address if there are discrepancies in the way that they use the data, and talk to us about that data? I mean, there's a lot that we can do to, you know, provide information to them, but nothing guarantees that they're gonna follow those standards, and we can get some feedback based on that data. How could we resolve that? Like, if there's a conflict there in the technical interpretation, how would we solve that? How we thought about that part?
So Francisco's question for the OWL was, once we put data out, people are, you know, able to use it and interpret it in any way they like. We may in fact get feedback that maybe disagrees with our interpretation of the data, and I'm hearing, do we have a plan or approach for how to deal with that? That's like everything we do here. I don't think, we don't have a specific, you know, I don't know that it's up to us necessarily to control how people use it outside of their
Yeah, it's
interactions with us, right? So, yeah.
technical demand that I can put on ask when they are asking questions based on what they understand the data, right? How we gonna put have capacity for those.
Yeah.
It's a dialogue that's gonna demand from us as well.
Yeah.
Beyond what we can put out there proactively.
I think the best thing we can do is continue to set our own standards for how we're going to apply the data, so that when people call you, call Aaron, call Jordan, they get the same answer about where we're at. And that I feel like we've done. In terms of, I think we're gonna get into this in the SWIMS update discussions, you know, about how does third-party data get utilized in those kind of tools and products. And it's an open, that's a totally different thing. But, you know, when it comes to water rights and legal determination, we try to control those processes and be fair in our work. So I know that's not a satisfying answer, but
I'll just say, I mean,
Yeah,
that's,
Jordan.
that's a big reason we wanted to be involved with this project from the kind of get-goes, because we saw down the future
Yeah.
that this data was gonna become a very, kind of disputed data set, and us having Aaron McKess, expertise in-house and being
Yourself,
involved with the development of the kind of the baseline data and, you know, the validation and kind of the use case formation. I think puts us in a really good position to be kind of leaders, and also having good relationships with the OpenET team and DRI. So like, if there are some major technical issues that come up, being able to work with them to make improvements or adjustments or, you know, ask questions. I think it puts us in a good position, as opposed to just kind of getting caught flat-footed with, hey, what do you think about this application? So.
I'd like to add 2 points to that. One, just, you know, the work that Jordan really did building this out did situate Oregon in a really good spot. So, you know, when we went to it was an applications conference for OpenET recently, a lot of the research that was done and discussed really was starting to come out of Oregon, right? Because it was an injection and an investment that Oregon made into these programs that got people doing work there. And so there was people from like Stanford doing work tied into Oregon and how this is performing in Oregon. So there was like a big benefit to that investment that, you know, isn't immediately apparent. And the second thing I wanted to just bring up from a technical point, that many of those data sets, like your mapper that we talked about, NDVI, OpenET, and those web apps that I kind of shared, this is touching on Francisco's point. These are publicly available, right? These we haven't necessarily evaluated the, like, how well Mapper performs in all ports of Oregon. So I just want to put that caveat out there, you know. It's something we've identified as a need, but, these are publicly available data. And in that sense, you know, it's out there.
So we got Matt's got his hand up. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I raised my hand. I just want to echo that and also say as research faculty at DRI and part of the OpenET consortium, OWRD has done fantastic work. Jordan, Aaron, Rachel, they haven't just taken the data and just ran with it. It's been interactive, it's been iterative, it's been collaborative. And OWRD has done a really fantastic job with helping push the science forward. And so I just wanted to quickly add, I really appreciate having such great partners in OWRD.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. Likewise.
Right, any other questions? Yes.
Curious, we've talked a lot about irrigated landscape and applied landscapes. I'm curious how accurate and applicable you think this is to wildland or non-irrigated landscapes, and whether we can use it to facilitate drought declarations or information like that.
Aaron?
OpenET performs not as well in naturally vegetated lands. We can look it up in Volk's paper. They have specific metrics on naturally vegetated areas. The Desert Research Institute and Matt, who we just saw, their work's focused on principally on irrigated agriculture. So it's not like they're delineating natural features. So in that data set, you don't have that information. You can access natural veg from like OpenET rasters and that sorts of things. And I can, do you want me to send you the paper? Okay.
Trev, related to kind of the drought work, I know that, Cameron Greenwood is sort of the drought coordinator for the department, and we have kind of begun these discussions around, how can we use this raster data, looking at the whole watershed, the whole landscape, and kind of how that compares with the prior 30 years now that we have this historical data set to kind of develop some kind of drought early warning. And so you kind of need that historical data set to build a statistical comparison. And now that we have that, I think there's a ton of different potential uses that would be exciting for the department to continue working on.
There's some like pretty interesting examples out of the southeast of that. Yeah. Cool application there. I think we have time for one more. Will, did you have a question?
Yeah, this might be more related to, you mentioned a tool called Mapper, and it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, that was more of like a use, non-use type predictive model. In those cases, has there been consideration for having field staff or water users like do ground truthing to either confirm like use or non-use and maybe feed those data back into that model?
So the question was around kind of having field staff collect data on the ground to help ground truth or validate the remote sensing irrigation mapping.
I really like that idea. I think that's a good thought. We're lucky that we got to work with Ross Deerdrift in Walla Walla River Basin, and he's helped us with some of that type of work. So, thank you for bringing that up.
I'll just add that we certainly are continuing our partnership with the OpenET Consortium and OSU, who now holds the contract for the continued development of this data. And we're hopeful there'll be a space for feedback to the broader model, but that's so many factors are involved in that, but yeah, great.
It reminds me a little of like there's like some stream flow permanence modeling that's going on.
Yeah.
Or like there's some great apps
Right.
that we developed where like
Yeah.
a member of the public or a employee
Right.
just click a button, mark a GPS point and say, yes, the stream's flowing. No, it's not.
Right.
I can see
Right.
that being kind of similar, could be a similar application.
That's really interesting. Huh, that's really interesting. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Great presentation, Aaron, and we've got a recording of it that we can share out. And yeah, thanks again for everyone for joining us. So have a good day. Bye, everyone.